Hello and welcome back. So this is the session 2 of configuring SQL Server SSL or SQL Server encrypted connection. So what we did on the first session was let me bring up these SSMS notes. So what we did, we actually created a self-signed certificate using a PowerShell command. Then we configured that certificate within the Windows certificate store, and we were trying to find the name or configure that certificate within SQL Server Configuration Manager. However, we were not able to find that certificate name right here, and the reason for that was, as I mentioned on the session 1, that we have a problem with a C name. Okay, so a C name probably if you are if you're a member of a local machine. So a CNAME is probably your device name. And the way you can find out your CNAME would be to click on it, click on the Start menu, actually right click on it, and then go to the system. And in here, you should be able to find your CNAME under this device name right here. So you should provide this name while you were creating the certificate rather than, let me bring up the PowerShell command. Rather than this CNAME right there. So you should have put, if I can minimize this so I can bring them side by side. So that will clears up some confusion in here. So device name right there, you should have put this device name in here for your DNS name instead of SQL SSL. So if you don't provide this name in here and the accurate name, then you may not be able to find that certificate name under the SQL Server Configuration Manager. Well, if you're a part of a domain, then what you're going to do in here is you're going to put your fully qualified domain name in here for DNS name. So what do I mean by fully qualified domain name? Let me um, let me bring up this note in here. So I'm assuming, let's say your device name, just for simplicity, is home. This is your device name, and let's say your domain name is office. So you go ahead and put your device name first, put a dot, then say office, and your root domain name is, let's say, org. So this is what is referenced as FQDN or fully qualified domain name. This should be used for your CNAME if you're a part of a domain name. So generally what it is device name dot separated by comma by a dot and domain name in here. So this is your FQDN. Okay. So for now, since I'm using a local machine, I'm not a part of a domain name, so a device name is enough for me to create that CNAME and fix that error. So let me go ahead and bring up PowerShell. And okay, so what I'm going to do in here is, since I already have this parameters written, so what I'm going to do in here is I'm going to go ahead and press on the up arrow key. So it brings up all the parameters, all the typing I did before. Just for simplicity, what I'm going to do in here is I'm going to go ahead and back all the way in here and just change this SS SQL SSL to my actually device name. As you can see, my device name is right there, desktop dash 54U1GH7. So I'm going to replace that with my device name. So desktop dash 54U1GH7. So don't press enter yet or a tab yet. It is because if you press the enter, you may cause an error and it breaks your shell command. So once you're at the end of your PowerShell command, just go ahead and enter in there. So your new certificate will be created. And as you can see in here is this time the C name is my actually this device name, which is what I wanted. Okay. So what I'm going to do in here is I go back to Windows Certificate Store. And the reason for that is if you remember from this SQL notes in here, I said once we created the certificate, we have to go configure that certificate within the Windows certificate store. So since we created it, if you remember, or if you just paid attention within the local machine name in here, if you can see it in here, I'm gonna go ahead and check the local machine certificate store. So if I click here, as you can see, the previous certificate is in there. So I go ahead and refresh. So the new certificate has been created. At this time, I do not need this. I'm gonna go ahead and delete it. Yes. So what I do in here is I'm gonna go configure this certificate as I did it for the previous one. So if you remember, right click properties, make it server authentication only, apply OK, and that's it. So let's go ahead and fire up SSMS. And well, generally I refresh in case, and then properties, and in here I should be able to see the name. Well, I'm not. Let's see if I go ahead and force yes, and then do I see it? Nope. So this is probably I have to refresh my connection or just refresh the SQL Server Configuration Manager. Let me cancel this, refresh one more time, and hopefully I see it this time. If I don't see it, then there is another thing that you have to look at it. Enforce yes, and yep, here we go. We see it now, and we actually needed a refresh. Okay, so I do see that certificate in here. Actually, if you look in here, I'm not seeing actually the C name in here. What I do see in here is that friendly name that we provided. Remember, we provided a SSL SQL connection. If I bring up my PowerShell to prove that for you, and let me expand this a little bit. If you look in here, that friendly name just popped up in there. So not the C name, which is correct. We do need that, either the friendly name or the C name to pop in here just to, identify our certificate. The other way that we can actually see that this is our certificate, we have to look at this thumbprint. So if you look in here, I'm going to go ahead and check on the last four digits. It says 17F9. So okay, let's finish our job in here before I go check on that. So once you find the certificate name in here, click on it. Make sure under the flags, force encryption is yes also. You're not doing anything else in here. Just go ahead, apply. Okay, so this tells me in order to take effect for SQL Server engine to recognize the certificate, you have to bounce or restart your SQL Server services, and you have to agree on that because other than that, it may not work at all. So click OK. What I'm going to do in here is again, I'm going to go ahead and bounce my SQL Server services. I'm going to go ahead and restart. That should be more than enough. And while this is restarting, a word of caution in here is if you try to restart after you assigned a certificate to your engine and this is not coming up, your username right there, whoever is this SQL Server account is or SQL Server service account is, that user do not have a proper permission to the certificate. So what you're going to do in here is you're going to go back to this local machine certificate store. And right there, you're gonna go ahead and in here and go to the alt task. All right, so you go manage private keys. So in here, you should find out the user that you want to add the permission here. Go ahead, add that permission, apply the proper read write or full control, however your organization security requirement is. Provide them the permission, and you should be good. And then go ahead and restart, and you should be fine. So in our case, we have this user is pretty much a privileged user. It has access to that certificate. So our SQL Server services came back. So what I'm going to do in here is I'm going to go ahead back to that certificate store. Right here, as I mentioned before, just to make sure we are looking at the right, certificate. I noticed that the last four digit in here is 17F9. So if you go in here, properties, and not in here, double click on it. And you should be able to see under details the thumbprint. And also you should be able to see the CNAME in here. If you look in here under subject, you should see your CNAME in there. And the thumbprint is right here. If I click, I should be able to see the same 17F9, 17F9 right there. So that is the certificate. I stressed on this just because while we were configuring the certificate within the SQL Server Configuration Manager, for some of you, the question would be why we don't have the CNAME in there instead of this friendly name. Yeah, but it popped up, generally brings up this friendly name in there, and that reflects to our actually certificate, okay? So we have the correct certificate, and what I'm gonna do in here is, again, I'm gonna go ahead and you know, disconnect SQL Server right here, and I'm gonna go ahead connect it. So in order to, okay, so here what I'm gonna do in here is I'm gonna go to the option in order to make sure we are configuring the certificate. So I'm gonna go ahead and click on encrypt option and check this. And as soon as I say connect, I get another error. So the error in here says that your certificate that you just created is not a part of, the trusted root authorities. What that means is if I go back to the certificate store in here, click on here, do you see that X in there? So that is actually referencing to that error. It says your certificate is not trusted. So what I'm going to do in here is I'm going to go ahead and stop this session because it is about 10 minutes. On the next session, I'm going to come back, fix this issue. And also before I do that, however, there is another option we have that we can actually tell our SSMS to say, well, trust that certificate for us for now. So you should check this option here, trust server certificate, and then go ahead and connect. Now, if you also have to, refresh your connection with the same options. So go ahead in here and you should trust it. All options are in there. I'm going to go say connect. Now, remember, first we had false for encrypt option. Now what I'm going to do in here is if I run this, it should bring it up as a true. And that is right now true. So pretty much right now we configured SSL with one problem that we have to go ahead and import and export our certificate to the root trusted root authorities so that we should be able not to trust that certificate, but actually fix the problem with our certificate. So the next session would be about how to import the certificate and also make sure we are importing it to the trusted root authority and we get rid of this X button. Okay, so I see you on the next session.